The sound of tearing silk screamed louder than the idling jet engines. It wasn't just a passenger being removed, it was a public execution of dignity. Dr. Vivienne Toussaint, a woman whose signature alone could shift global markets, lay sprawled on the jet bridge floor, her glasses cracked, her wrist bruising under the grip of an airport security officer. Inside the cabin, the first-class purser, Bradford, smirked, believing he had just cleared out trash to make room for a VIP. He didn't know that the phone in Vivian's hand wasn't dialing a lawyer, it was dialing the Federal Treasury. In exactly 14 minutes, Sky Horizon Airways wouldn't just lose a passenger, they were about to lose $4 billion. And Bradford? He was about to become the most unemployable man in aviation history. The rain at O'Hare International Airport lashed against the reinforced glass of Terminal 3, distorting the neon glow of the runway lights into smeary, impressionistic streaks of blue and orange. Inside the cabin of Sky Horizon Airways Flight No. 2, bound for Zurich, the atmosphere was hermetically sealed luxury. The scent of warmed lavender towels and expensive leather filled the first-class cabin, a sharp contrast to the damp, frantic energy of the economy boarding queue. Dr. Vivienne Toussaint sat in Siat 1A, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow and rhythmic. To the untrained eye, and specifically to the eyes of the flight crew, she looked like a mistake. She was wearing a charcoal grey cashmere hoodie that had seen better days, loose-fitting joggers, and slip-on sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, utilitarian bun, and she clutched a battered leather satchel against her chest as if it contained her lunch rather than a terrifyingly complex merger agreement for the Euro-Asian Infrastructure Bank. She was exhausted. It had been a 72-hour sprint in Washington, D.C., negotiating the fine print of the Federal Transportation Revitalization Grant, a massive $4 billion infusion of taxpayer money designed to save struggling legacy carriers. Sky Horizon was the primary beneficiary. Vivian, as the external Auditor General for the Oversight Committee, had been the one to give the final nod. She was the only reason the airline wasn't filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on Monday morning. But right now, she wasn't the Auditor General. She was just a tired 60-year-old woman who wanted a glass of sparkling water and 6 hours of sleep. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that set Vivian's teeth on edge. She opened one eye. Standing over her was Bradford Halloway, the flight's chief purser. Bradford was a man who wore his uniform like a costume of authority. His tie was knotted with aggressive perfection. His hair was gelled into an immovable helmet, and his smile didn't reach his cold, scanning eyes. He was holding a tablet, tapping it rhythmically against his thigh. "Yes?" Vivian asked, her voice raspy from lack of use over the last few hours. "May I see your boarding pass again, please?" Bradford asked. It wasn't a question. Vivian sighed, shifting in the wide leather seat. "I already showed it at the gate and to the attendant at the door." "I understand that," Bradford said, his volume slightly louder than necessary, drawing the attention of the passenger in 1B, a tech CEO type, burying his face in a laptop. "But we have a discrepancy in the manifest. Just produce the pass, please." Vivian reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled slip of thermal paper. She handed it to him. Bradford looked at it, then looked at his tablet, then looked back at her. He frowned, a theatrical expression of confusion designed to shame her. "Seat 1A. Toussaint. Strange." "What is strange?" Vivian asked, sitting up straighter. The adrenaline of conflict was starting to burn off her fatigue. "It's just that, well, usually our first-class cabin is reserved for our full-fare premium partners or global elite status members," Bradford said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was actually quite audible. "This ticket appears to be an upgrade using miles, a lot of miles. I bought the ticket full fare 3 weeks ago," Vivian corrected him calmly. "Through the corporate portal." "Corporate portal," Bradford repeated, chuckling dryly. "Right. Look, Ms. Toussaint, I'm going to hold on to this for a moment. We have a bit of a situation with the weight and balance of the aircraft, and we might need to reseat you." "Reseat me?" Vivian's brow furrowed. "This is a Boeing 777. I hardly think moving one woman from first to economy is going to keep the plane in the air." Bradford's smile vanished. "It's a figure of speech, ma'am. It's an operational necessity. Just sit tight." He walked away, taking her boarding pass with him. Vivian watched him go, a sinking feeling in her gut. She knew this behavior. She had seen it in boardrooms, in Senate hearings, and in high-stakes negotiations. It was the behavior of a small man trying to assert dominance over someone he deemed inferior. She looked down at her hoodie. "Ah," she thought, "he thinks I'm nobody. He thinks I'm a lottery winner or a staffer who got lucky." She considered pulling out her badge, the heavy, federally issued ID that gave her clearance to walk into the White House Situation Room. But she hesitated. She was tired of using her title as a shield. She had paid $6,000 for this seat. She deserved to sit in it because she was a paying customer, not because she held the purse strings to the airline's survival. Moments later, the commotion at the front of the plane intensified. A man swept into the cabin, flanked by an entourage of 2 nervous-looking assistants. The newcomer was young, perhaps late 20s, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars. He had the jawline of a model and the arrogance of a Roman emperor. This was Harrison Cole, the son of Senator Raymond Cole, the very senator who had been lobbying hardest for the Sky Horizon bailout. Vivian recognized him immediately. She had seen his face in the tabloids, usually stumbling out of nightclubs or crashing luxury cars. "Brad, seriously, this is ridiculous," Harrison said loudly, tossing his coat at a passing junior flight attendant without looking at her. "My father specifically said, seat 1A. I need the bulkhead for the legroom. I tweaked my knee skiing in Aspen." Bradford melted instantly. His stiff, authoritarian posture dissolved into obsequious fawning. "Mr. Cole, absolutely. I apologize for the confusion. The gate agents are, well, they aren't the brightest. We're sorting it out right now." "Sort it out faster," Harrison snapped, pulling out his phone. "I have a call to take before takeoff." Bradford turned on his heel and marched back toward Vivian. This time he wasn't smiling. He was on a mission. The pleasantries were over. Vivian watched the pantomime with a detached, clinical interest. "So that's it," she thought. "The senator's son wants my seat." The irony was palpable. The senator had begged Vivian just yesterday to approve the funding, claiming it was to protect American jobs. Apparently, it was also to protect his son's legroom. Bradford loomed over her. "Ms. Toussaint, I'm afraid I have bad news. Your ticket has been flagged as invalid." "Invalid?" Vivian asked, her voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "In what capacity?" "System error," Bradford lied smoothly. "Double booking. It happens. We're going to have to move you. We have a lovely seat for you in Economy Plus. Row 24. It's an aisle seat." "I am not moving," Vivian said. She didn't shout. She didn't stand up. She simply stated it as a fact of physics, like gravity. "Ma'am, you don't have a choice," Bradford hissed. "This seat belongs to Mr. Cole. He is a Global Services Platinum member. You are, well, the system doesn't even show a frequent flyer number for you." "That's because I don't fly for points, Mr. Holloway," Vivian said, reading his name tag. "I fly for business, and I have a contract with this airline. It's called a ticket. I suggest you go tell Mr. Cole that 1A is occupied." Bradford's face turned a mottled shade of red. He leaned in, invading her personal space. "Listen to me, lady. We are closing the doors in 3 minutes. You can walk back to row 24, or I can have you escorted off this plane. And if you get escorted off, you're not going to Zurich. You're going to a holding cell." Vivian looked past Bradford, locking eyes with Harrison Cole, who was impatiently tapping his foot near the galley. Harrison sneered at her and pointed at his watch. "Make the call, Bradford," Vivian said softly. "But I promise you, it will be the most expensive phone call you ever make." Bradford straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. "Have it your way." He tapped his earpiece. "Captain?" "Yes, we have a disturbance in first. Passenger refusing crew instructions. Yes, I'm going to need law enforcement at the gate. Immediately." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted from awkward to electric. The other passengers, previously determined to ignore the commotion in favor of their pre-flight champagne, were now watching openly. Smartphones were appearing, cameras discreetly aimed through the gaps between seats. Captain Geoffrey Pine emerged from the cockpit. He was a man of the old school, silver-haired and broad-shouldered, with a pilot's badge that usually commanded instant respect. He didn't look at Vivian. He looked at Bradford. "What's the problem here?" Pine asked, his voice booming. "She's refusing to vacate the seat, Captain," Bradford said, playing the victim perfectly. "I've explained that it's a duplicate booking and that we've accommodated her in the main cabin. She's becoming belligerent." "Belligerent?" Vivian repeated, raising an eyebrow. She was still sitting with her hands folded in her lap. "I haven't raised my voice once, Captain. I am simply refusing to be bullied so that you can give my seat to a donor's son." Captain Pine finally looked at her. He took in the hoodie, the lack of makeup, the messy hair. He made the same calculation Bradford had. Low value, easy target. "Ma'am, on my aircraft, the flight crew's instructions are federal law," Pine said sternly. "If you do not move, you are in violation of FAA regulations. We don't have time for a debate. We have a slot to hit. Grab your bag." "Captain Pine," Vivian said, reading his name from his jacket, "I know you are under pressure, but I strongly suggest you check the passenger manifest code next to my name before you proceed. It should be marked Gov Biud 1. "I don't care if it's marked Queen of England," Pine snapped, his patience fraying. Harrison Cole was loudly complaining to a flight attendant about the delay, and the noise was grating on the captain's nerves. "You are disrupting this flight. Get off." "No," Vivian said. 2 airport police officers, followed by a TSA agent, boarded the plane. They brought with them the cold, damp air of the jet bridge and the heavy, ominous clinking of utility belts. "Gentlemen," Bradford said, stepping aside with a flourish. "She's all yours. Trespassing and failure to comply." The lead officer, a burly man named Officer Kowski, looked tired. He looked at Vivian, then at Bradford. "Ma'am, come on. Don't make this hard. Just grab your stuff." "I have a right to be here," Vivian said, her heart hammering against her ribs, though her face remained stone. "I paid for this seat. This is discrimination, plain and simple." "It's not discrimination. It's a reaccommodation," Bradford shouted, losing his composure. "Get her off." Harrison Cole stepped forward, sipping a mimicosa that a junior attendant had hurriedly handed him. "Hey, officers," he drawled. "Can we hurry this up? My father, Senator Cole, is waiting for me to land in Zurich. This lady is holding up international diplomacy." Officer Kowski's demeanor hardened at the mention of the senator. He didn't want political heat. He just wanted to clear the aisle. "Ma'am, I'm giving you one last chance," Kowski said, reaching for his handcuffs. "Stand up." Vivian looked at the officer. She looked at Bradford, who was practically vibrating with glee. She looked at the captain, who had turned his back to return to the cockpit, washing his hands of the violence to come. "I am staying seated," Vivian said. Kowski nodded to his partner. "Grab her." The violence was sudden and shocking. Kowski lunged forward, grabbing Vivian's left arm. His partner grabbed her right. They didn't help her stand. They yanked her. "Ow!" Vivian cried out as her shoulder twisted at an unnatural angle. The pain was sharp and white-hot. "Stop resisting!" Kowski yelled. Though she wasn't resisting, she was just trying to keep her balance as they hauled her out of the deep leather bucket seat. Her glasses flew off her face, skittering across the aisle and landing near Harrison Cole's expensive Italian loafers. Harrison laughed. He actually laughed. He kicked the frames away with the toe of his shoe. "You're hurting me!" Vivian gasped, the air knocked out of her as she was slammed against the bulkhead wall. "You should have moved when you were told," Bradford shouted over the screams of a woman in row 2. The officers dragged her down the narrow aisle. Her sneaker caught on the carpet and came off. She was being dragged shoeless, half-blind, and terrified through a gauntlet of horrified passengers. Phones were held high now. The flash of cameras strobed like a disco. "This is insane," a man in row 3 shouted, standing up. "She's an old lady, reckless." "Sit down, sir, or you're next." Bradford pointed a shaking finger at the passenger. Vivian tried to plant her feet, to regain some shred of dignity. But the officers were too strong. They manhandled her to the aircraft door. The cold air of the jet bridge hit her face. They didn't stop at the door. They dragged her onto the metal ramp. Kowski lost his grip on her arm and shoved her forward to compensate. Vivian stumbled, her socks slipping on the industrial metal floor. She fell hard, her knees slamming into the grating, her head cracking against the railing. She lay there for a second, the world spinning. The pain in her wrist was blinding. Above her, standing in the doorway of the plane, Bradford Halloway looked down. He smoothed his tie, picked up a stray piece of lint from his jacket, and sneered. "Have a nice flight, honey," he said. He signaled to the gate agent. "Close the door." The heavy steel door of the aircraft slammed shut, sealing the warmth and the light inside. The locking mechanism engaged with a final, mechanical thud. Vivian was left alone on the jet bridge with the 2 panting officers. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, clouding her vision. Officer Kowski looked down at her, his chest heaving. "You can get up now. We're taking you to the holding cell. You're being charged with interfering with a flight crew and resisting arrest." Vivian didn't move immediately. She breathed in the smell of jet fuel and rain. She felt the cold metal seeping into her bones. Slowly, painfully, she reached into her pocket with her good hand. Her phone was still there. The screen was cracked, but it lit up. "Mom, put the phone away," Kowski warned. Vivian ignored him. She wiped the blood from her eye. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call the police. She opened her secure contacts list. She pressed a speed dial number labeled SEC, Treasury, Private Line. As the phone rang, Vivian looked up at the officer, her eyes blazing with a fury that made him take a step back. "Officer," she whispered, her voice like grinding glass. "You better pray that plane crashes, because if it lands, the company that owns it won't exist anymore." The line clicked open. "Vivian?" A deep, authoritative voice answered. "I thought you were in the air. We're waiting for the confirmation on the Sky Horizon wire transfer." "Robert," Vivian said, and her voice didn't waver. "Kill it." "Excuse me, the signal is bad." "Kill the deal," Vivian said, louder this time. "The $4 billion. Freeze it. Revoke the grant. Immediately." "Vivian, are you insane? The press release goes out in 20 minutes. The president is—" "I said freeze it!" Vivian screamed, the raw emotion finally breaking through. I am invoking Article 5 of the Oversight Charter. Gross negligence and failure of operational compliance. Freeze the funds, Robert, and get the legal team ready. I'm at O'Hare. I've just been assaulted by Sky Horizon staff." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Assaulted?" Robert's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "Who?" "Everyone," Vivian said, staring at the closed door of the jet. "Absolutely everyone." The holding cell at O'Hare Terminal 3 was a masterclass in hostile architecture. It was a windowless box, painted a shade of beige that suggested despair, smelling of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. A single stainless steel bench was bolted to the wall, cold enough to sap the heat from a human body in minutes. Vivian sat on the edge of the bench, cradling her left wrist. It had swollen to the size of a grapefruit, the skin tight and shiny, throbbing in sync with the erratic rhythm of her heart. Her glasses were gone, left on the floor of the Boeing 777, so the room was a blur of soft edges. Blood from the cut above her eye had dried into a crusty, itching line down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. It was evidence. Officer Kowski sat at a small metal desk outside the bars, pecking at a keyboard with two thick index fingers. He was humming a tune, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just assaulted a 60-year-old woman. To him, she was just another disruptive passenger, a statistic to be processed, fined, and banned. "Name," Kowski grunted, not looking up. Vivian stared at the wall. She was entering a state of hyperfocus. The pain was there, but she had pushed it into a small box in the back of her mind. In the front of her mind, she was drafting the subpoenas. "I asked for a name, lady," Kowski said, swiveling his chair around. "If you don't cooperate, we keep you here overnight. No bail. And trust me, the night shift guys aren't as nice as me." "I gave you my ID," Vivian said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's in the satchel you confiscated." Yeah, the badge." "I saw it," Kowski scoffed. "Department of the Treasury. Looked fake to me. We get people carrying fake FBI badges, fake CIA badges. Usually helps them feel important when they're drunk at the airport bar. I sent it down to DHS for verification. Just tell me your name." "My name," Vivian said, turning her head slowly to look at him, "is the reason you will never work in law enforcement again. My name is the reason your pension fund is about to evaporate." Kowski laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Ooh, I'm shaking. What are you? The Queen of Sheba?" Suddenly, the heavy steel door at the end of the corridor banged open. Kowski jumped. "Hey, authorized personnel only. Who?" A woman stormed in. She was wearing a trench coat over a pajama top, her hair wet as if she'd just stepped out of a shower and run straight to a car. This was Special Agent Elena Rostova, the head of the DHS field office at O'Hare. Behind her were two men in dark suits who moved with the silent, terrifying precision of Secret Service agents. Kowski stood up, confused. "Agent Rostova, I didn't know you were—" Rostova didn't even look at him. She rushed to the cell bars, her face pale. She gripped the cold steel. "Dr. Toussaint?" Rostova asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Oh my God, open this door. Now." Kowski blinked. "Ma'am, she's a suspect. Assault on a flight crew, resisting arrest. I'm just processing—" "Open the goddamn door, Kowski!" Rostova screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Kowski fumbled for his keys, his hands suddenly shaking. He unlocked the cell. Rostova rushed in, kneeling beside Vivian. She saw the swollen wrist, the blood on the face, the missing shoes. She looked horrified. "Dr. Toussaint, I am so incredibly sorry. I just got the call from Washington. Are you okay? Do you need a medic?" I need my phone, Vivian said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were cold, dead weights. And I need the names of every officer involved in my extraction. You'll have them, Rostova promised. She turned to Kowski, her eyes narrowing into slits. Officer Kowski, step away from the desk. You are relieved of duty effectively immediately. Surrender your weapon and your badge. What? Kowski stammered, backing up against the filing cabinet. For what? She's just a passenger. She refused to leave the plane. She is the Auditor General for the United States Oversight Committee, Rostova hissed, stepping closer to him. She is the highest-ranking civilian auditor in the federal government. She has level 5 security clearance, and you just dragged her across a tarmac like a sack of potatoes. Kowski's face went white. He looked at Vivian, really looked at her, for the first time. The messy bun and the hoodie didn't look like poverty anymore. They looked like the eccentricity of someone so powerful they didn't need to dress up. Vivian stood up. She swayed slightly, and Rostova moved to support her, but Vivian waved her off. She limped out of the cell, her socks wet and dirty. She stopped in front of Kowski. You broke my wrist, she said simply. I was following protocol, Kowski whispered, his bravado gone. Your protocol, Vivian said, just cost Sky Horizon Airways $4 billion. I hope Mr. Cole's legroom was worth it. She turned to Rostova. Get me a conference room, and get me a secure line to the White House press secretary. I have a statement to make. While Vivian was being treated by a terrified EMT in the airport director's office, the world outside was catching fire. At 35,000 feet, Flight 902 was cruising smoothly over the Atlantic. Harrison Cole was asleep in seat 1A, a glass of warm cognac resting on the console. Bradford Halloway was in the galley, gossiping with a flight attendant about the crazy lady and how good it felt to finally put someone in their place. They were in a metal tube, disconnected from the internet, blissfully unaware that the ground beneath them had shifted. But on the ground, the video had dropped. A passenger in row 4, a 20-year-old student named Leo, had recorded the entire incident on his iPhone 15. He hadn't just recorded the dragging, he had recorded the conversation beforehand. He had recorded Bradford's sneering condescension. He had recorded Harrison Cole's "My father is a senator" comment. He had recorded the bone-chilling snap of Vivian's glasses breaking. He posted it to TikTok with the caption, "Sky Horizon beats up grandma for senator's son." Boycott Sky Horizon, Walkas eat the rich. The algorithm, sensing the raw, visceral rage in the content, poured gasoline on it. In 10 minutes it had 50,000 views. In 30 minutes it had 1 million. In an hour, it was the #1 trending topic globally on X, formerly Twitter. The video was titled "The $1 Billion Drag" by a clever Reddit user, and the name stuck. At Sky Horizon's global headquarters in Dallas, Texas, the Situation Room was chaos. CEO Richard Sterling was a man who prided himself on control. He had spent the last 6 months lobbying, dining, and bribing his way toward the federal bailout. He had popped a bottle of Dom Perignon that morning, thinking the deal was done. Now he was staring at a wall of monitors, his face grey. "Who is she?" Sterling screamed at his PR director. "Tell me she's a nobody. Tell me she's a drunk tourist." The PR director, a young woman named Sarah who looked like she was about to vomit, shook her head. "Sir, it's worse. It's much worse. What could be worse than a PR nightmare? Sir, CNN just identified her. That's Dr. Vivian Toussaint." Sterling froze. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. "Toussaint?" Sterling whispered. The auditor?" "The one signing our check," Sarah confirmed. Sterling collapsed into his chair. He felt like he was having a heart attack. "She was on the plane?" In economy? She was in first, Sarah read from her tablet, her voice shaking. She paid full fare. Our crew, kicked her out to seat Senator Cole's son. Sterling closed his eyes. He saw the $4 billion, the money that was supposed to pay off their debts, buy new jets, and give him a $20 million bonus, dissolving into smoke. "Get Senator Cole on the phone," Sterling croaked. "We tried, sir," the legal counsel said from the corner. "Senator Cole just issued a press release. He's denouncing Sky Horizon. He says he had no knowledge of his son's actions and is appalled by the airline's brutality. He's throwing us under the bus to save his re-election campaign." "He can't do that!" Sterling roared. "He asked for the upgrade." "There's no paper trail, sir. It was a verbal request to the VIP desk. It's your word against his." Just then, the main screen on the wall switched to a breaking news alert from CNBC. The headline was in bold red letters: "Treasury freezes, Sky Horizon funding." The news anchor, looking grave, spoke to the camera. "Breaking news. The U.S. Department of the Treasury has officially announced an immediate suspension of the Sky Horizon Revitalization Grant. In a statement released moments ago, Auditor General Vivian Toussaint invoked the gross negligence clause. Sky Horizon stock has been halted for trading after plummeting 40% in pre-market futures. Sterling watched the screen. He watched his net worth vanish. "Get me the manifest for Flight 902, Sterling said, his voice dead. "Why, sir?" "Because I want to know the name of the purser who did this," Sterling said, his eyes burning with a murderous rage. "And I want him fired before the wheels touch the ground in Zurich." Back at O'Hare, Vivian sat in the conference room. Her arm was in a sling, her face cleaned and bandaged. She looked small in the big leather chair, but her presence filled the room. Across from her sat the airport director, the chief of police, and a representative from Sky Horizon who had been sent as a sacrificial lamb. "Dr. Toussaint," the Sky Horizon rep stammered, sweating profusely. "On behalf of the airline, we want to offer you a settlement. We are authorized to offer you $5 million right now for a non-disclosure agreement and a joint statement calling this a misunderstanding." Vivian looked at the man. She picked up a glass of water with her good hand and took a sip. $5 million, she repeated. 10, the rep said quickly. 10 million, and lifetime first class travel for you and your family. Vivian laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. "You think this is about money? You think you can buy my dignity with the same money you were going to steal from the taxpayers?" She leaned forward. "I don't want your money. I have a salary. I want your airline. I want to see the bankruptcy filing on my desk by Monday morning. I want an investigation into your VIP upgrade protocols, and I want the crew of Flight 902 detained upon arrival in Zurich for extradition." "Extradition?" the rep squeaked. "For what?" "For kidnapping," Vivian said calmly. "Once they closed that door and took off, they transported my luggage, which contains classified federal documents, without me. That is theft of government property. And the assault? That happened on federal jurisdiction." She stood up. "Keep your 10 million. I'm going to take everything." High above the Swiss Alps, Sky Horizon Flight 902 began its initial descent into Zurich. The sun was rising over the jagged, snow-capped peaks, casting a brilliant golden light into the cabin. It was a picture-perfect morning, the kind of view that airlines put on billboards. Inside the first-class cabin, the mood was one of serene, self-satisfied luxury. The smell of freshly brewed Arabica coffee and warm croissants wafted through the air. Bradford Halloway adjusted his tie in the galley mirror. He looked at his reflection and smiled. He felt good, powerful. He had handled a situation effectively, protected a high-value client, and ensured the comfort of a senator's son. In his mind, he was already composing the incident report, framing it as a heroic defense of cabin safety against an unstable passenger. He imagined the commendation letter from corporate. Maybe this would finally be the push he needed to become a check airman or a base manager. He walked out into the aisle with a silver pot of coffee. "More coffee, Mr. Cole?" Bradford asked, his voice silky. Harrison Cole groaned, pulling the eye mask off his face. He looked terrible, hungover and dehydrated. He had spent the first 4 hours of the flight drinking the airline's supply of vintage Dom Perignon. "Yeah, black," Harrison grunted. "And get me some aspirin. My head is pounding." "Coming right up, sir," Bradford said. "We'll be on the ground in 30 minutes. I've radioed ahead to ensure the VIP transfer service is waiting for you at the gate. No customs lines for you today." "Good," Harrison muttered, taking a sip. At least someone knows how to treat people of status. That old hag back in Chicago ruined my vibe. She won't be bothering anyone for a long time. Bradford chuckled. I'd be surprised if she isn't still in a holding cell. In the cockpit, however, the mood was drastically different. Captain Jeffrey Pine was staring at his flight management computer with a furrowed brow. The radio crackled to life. "Sky Horizon 902, this is Zurich Control. Do not proceed to gate E43. I repeat, do not proceed to the terminal." Pine pressed the transmit button. "Zurich Control, this is Sky Horizon 902. We have a heavy load of connecting passengers. A remote stand will cause significant delays. Is there a maintenance issue at the gate?" There was a pause. A long, static-filled silence that made the first officer nervous. "Negative, Sky Horizon 902, the Swiss controller's voice came back, clipped and professional. "We have orders from the Federal Office of Civil Aviation and the Cantonal Police. You are to proceed immediately to remote stand Zulu 19. This is a secure isolation pad on the North Tarmac. Shut down engines immediately upon arrival. Do not open doors until instructed. Acknowledge." Pine looked at his first officer. "Secure isolation pad. That's for hijackings or biohazards. What the hell is going on?" "Maybe a security threat," the first officer suggested, checking the transponder. "Or maybe—" Pine's stomach turned over. He remembered the woman, the auditor. He remembered her calm, terrifying warning. "I suggest you check the passenger manifest code." He hadn't checked. He had been too busy, too arrogant. He quickly punched a few keys on the ACARS system, pulling up the full crew manifest and passenger details that he had ignored earlier. He scrolled down to 1A. To St. Vivian. Status, US Gov. Exec Level 1. Agency, Treasury, Oversight. Flag, Diplomatic Priority. Pine's face went the color of ash. He didn't just see a name. He saw his pension evaporating. He saw his pilot's license shredding. "Oh, God." Pine whispered. "What is it, Skipper?" "We didn't kick off a passenger," Pine said, his voice trembling. "We kicked off the bank." Back in the cabin, the fasten seatbelt sign chimed. Bradford did his final walk-through. He felt a vibration in his pocket. His phone. He shouldn't have turned it on yet, strictly speaking, but they were low enough to catch the Swiss cell towers. He pulled it out, expecting a text from his boyfriend, or maybe a Grindr notification. Instead, his screen was flooded. 47 missed calls, 1/12. Text messages, emails, 50+, urgent termination notice. Bradford frowned. Termination notice? That had to be spam. He unlocked the phone. The first text was from his friend Jessica, a flight attendant on a different route. "Brad, what did you do? It's everywhere. You're trending on Twitter. Hide." The second text was from his union rep. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not sign anything." The company has already issued a statement. They are cutting you loose, Brad. You're on your own." Bradford's hands started to shake. The coffee pot rattled against the saucer he was holding. He opened the news app. The headline punched him in the gut. Sky Horizon. Stock crashes after viral assault of federal auditor. There was a picture. It was a screenshot from the video. It showed him, Bradford Halloway, sneering at Vivian as she lay on the jet bridge floor. The caption read, "The face of corporate arrogance." Bradford looked up. The cabin was spinning. He looked at Harrison Cole, who was obliviously picking a crumb off his cashmere sweater. The intercom beeped. It was the captain. "Flight attendants, prepare for immediate arrival." Pine's voice sounded strangled. "Please take your jump seats. Now." The plane banked hard, turning away from the gleaming glass terminals and heading toward a desolate stretch of concrete surrounded by high fences and flashing blue lights. "Why are we parking out here?" Harrison Cole complained, looking out the window. "This looks like a cargo dump." Bradford didn't answer. He sank into his jump seat, the blood rushing in his ears, drowning out the roar of the engines. He realized with a terrifying clarity that the plane wasn't landing. It was being pulled over. The Boeing 757 touched down with a heavy thud, braking harder than usual. There was no gentle taxiing. The aircraft turned sharply off the runway and rolled toward the isolated hardstand. Through the windows, the passengers could see the reception committee. It wasn't baggage handlers. 6 black vans with flashing blue lights, 4 Zurich police cruisers, 2 black sedans with diplomatic flags, and a staircase truck already positioning itself before the engines had even fully spooled down. "What is this?" Harrison Cole demanded, standing up before the seatbelt sign turned off. "Is this for me? Did my dad send a security detail?" He smiled, adjusting his jacket. "Classic Dad. Overkill. But I appreciate the hustle." The engines whined down into silence. The silence in the cabin was heavy, oppressive. Usually, this was the moment of shuffling bags and clicking seatbelts. Today, nobody moved. Everyone was looking out the window. The main cabin door opened. Bradford stood up, his legs feeling like jelly. He was supposed to stand at the door and say goodbye. That was his job. But before he could get there, 3 men boarded. They weren't Sky Horizon ground staff. They wore the dark blue uniforms of the Kantonspolizei Zurich, Zurich Cantonal Police, and they were armed with submachine guns slung across their chests. Behind them walked a man in a sharp grey suit, holding a clipboard. "Remain seated," the lead officer shouted in English, his voice echoing through the first-class cabin. "Everyone, hands on the armrests, now." Harrison Cole scoffed. "Hey buddy, relax. I'm Harrison Cole. I'm an American citizen. You can't tell me to." "Sit down," the officer barked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Harrison sat down, his mouth hanging open. The man in the grey suit stepped forward. He looked at the passengers, then at the crew. He consulted his clipboard. "I am Inspector Weber," he announced. "I have a warrant issued by the Swiss federal prosecutor in cooperation with the United States Department of Justice and Interpol." He looked straight at Bradford. "Which one of you is Bradford Halloway?" Bradford tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He raised a trembling hand. "Step forward," Weber said. I was doing my job," Bradford squeaked. "I followed protocol." "You are under arrest," Weber said, his tone bored and bureaucratic. "Charges include aggravated assault, endangerment of flight safety, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government." "Defraud!" Bradford cried, as an officer grabbed his wrists, spinning him around. "I'm a flight attendant. I don't do finance." "You facilitated the illegal removal of a federal auditor to secure a fraudulent benefit for a third party," Weber recited. That makes you an accessory to the fraud, and since you crossed international waters, it's a federal crime. The handcuffs clicked, cold, tight, and final. Harrison Cole? Weber called out next. Harrison stood up, trying to muster his usual arrogance. This is a mistake. Call Senator Cole right now. I demand you call my father. Your father isn't taking calls, Weber said, signaling to the second officer. But we have instructions from the U.S. Embassy. Your passport has been revoked by the State Department pending an investigation into bribery and misuse of government influence. Revoked? Harrison's face crumbled. But I'm in Switzerland. If you revoke my passport, You are an undocumented alien, Weber finished for him, which means you will be detained until deportation proceedings can be arranged. And since you have no valid visa, you will be held at the Cloten detention facility. You can't do this, Harrison screamed as the officer grabbed him. I'm rich. Do you know who I am? Yes, Weber said, signaling for them to be taken away. You are the man who cost an airline $4 billion for extra legroom. As Harrison and Bradford were marched off the plane, down the stairs, and into the waiting police vans, the other passengers watched in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a slow clap started from row 3, then row 4. Soon the entire first-class cabin was applauding. Back in the galley, the printer began to whir. It was the flight manifest for the return leg. But there was also a message from Sky Horizon HQ, addressed to the captain. Captain Pine picked it up. His hands were shaking. To Captain G. Pine from Flight Operations. Subject: Immediate suspension. Message: You are relieved of command, effective immediately. First Officer Daniels will ferry the aircraft back to JFK empty. You are to remain in Zurich to assist local authorities. Do not speak to the press. P.S. The company has filed for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy protection. As of Iron 9, est. Pine dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to the empty champagne bottle Harrison Cole had drained. The airline was dead. The careers were dead. The arrogance that had fueled Flight 902 had crashed and burned, extinguished by a 60-year-old woman in a hoodie who was currently sipping tea in a Chicago hospital, watching the news on a wall-mounted TV. Vivian Toussaint had warned them. She told them it would be the most expensive phone call they ever made. She was right. It cost them everything. The hearing room of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation was a cauldron of tension. Outside, the humid Washington, D.C. summer pressed against the marble walls of the Capitol. Inside, the air was frigid, conditioned to a sterile chill that did nothing to cool the tempers of the men and women gathered there. It had been 6 months since the incident at O'Hare, but the shockwaves were still toppling dominoes across the aviation and political landscape. The room was packed beyond capacity. Journalists from every major network lined the back walls, their cameras trained like sniper rifles on the witness table. In the gallery, former employees of Sky Horizon, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, sat in rows, wearing T-shirts that read, "Accountability Now" and "Passengers Not Cargo." They had lost their jobs in the bankruptcy, but their anger wasn't directed at the woman sitting at the witness table. It was directed at the empty chairs where the airline's executives should have been. Dr. Vivian Toussaint sat alone. She looked markedly different from the battered, exhausted woman dragged off Flight 902. Her wrist was fully healed, though she absent-mindedly rubbed the spot where the bone had snapped. She wore a sharp navy blazer, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant, uncompromising chignon. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a judge. Senator Raymond Cole sat on the dais, but he was a shadow of the titan he had once been. He was not chairing the committee. That honor had fallen to Senator Alvarez, a fierce critic of corporate bailouts. Cole sat at the far end of the row, his skin sallow, his suit hanging loosely on a frame that had shrunk under the weight of scandal. He was fighting for his political life, but everyone in the room knew it was a losing battle. The Sky Horizon audit had opened a Pandora's box of his financial entanglements, and the Department of Justice was circling. "Dr. Toussaint," Senator Alvarez began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Thank you for appearing voluntarily. The committee understands that your office has completed the final forensic audit of Sky Horizon Airways. Can you summarize your findings for the record?" Vivian adjusted the microphone. Her voice was calm, low, and perfectly steady. "Thank you, Senator. The findings are simple. Sky Horizon Airways was operating a Ponzi scheme disguised as an airline. They leveraged the federal revitalization grant not to improve safety or retain staff, but to buy back their own stock and pay out executive bonuses. The incident on Flight 902 was merely a symptom of a corporate culture that viewed regulations as suggestions and passengers as inconveniences." Senator Cole leaned forward, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Dr. Toussaint, let's cut to the chase. You destroyed a legacy carrier. You put 30,000 Americans out of work because you were asked to change seats. Do you feel any remorse for the collateral damage of your ego?" The room went deadly silent. It was a vicious attack, the last gasp of a dying animal. Vivian turned her chair slowly to face him. She took off her reading glasses. "Senator," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "I did not destroy Sky Horizon. Mathematics destroyed Sky Horizon. You cannot spend $4 billion you don't have. You cannot assault federal officers. You cannot bribe your way out of gravity. I didn't kill the patient, Senator. I just signed the death certificate." She picked up a document from her folder. "And regarding the seat change you mentioned, I have here the transcript of the call you made to CEO Richard Sterling 10 minutes after the plane took off. You didn't ask for a seat change. You asked, and I quote, 'Is the old witch gone?'" Gasps erupted in the gallery. Senator Cole's face drained of blood. That is privileged communication," Cole stammered. "Not anymore," Vivian said coldly. "It was on the company server. It's public record now." Senator Alvarez banged her gavel to restore order, but the damage was done. Cole slumped back in his chair, defeated. "Let us move to the criminal proceedings," Senator Alvarez continued, struggling to hide a satisfied smirk. "What is the status of the individuals involved in the assault?" Vivian turned back to the center. "Bradford Halloway pleaded guilty last week to federal assault and interference with a flight crew. Because of the severity of the injury and the intent to humiliate, the judge was not lenient. He was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of probation. He is permanently banned from employment in the transportation sector." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "And Mr. Harrison Cole?" Alvarez asked. "Mr. Cole is currently in custody," Vivian replied. "After being deported from Switzerland, he was arrested by the FBI upon arrival at JFK. He faces charges of wire fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. It appears he was using his father's accounts to fund a lifestyle that exceeded his trust fund. His trial begins next month. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years. The camera panned to Senator Cole, who had covered his face with his hands. "And finally," Vivian added, "Richard Sterling, the former CEO." "Yes." "He has fled to a non-extradition country," Vivian said dryly. "But his assets in the United States, totaling $150 million, have been seized. That money constitutes the core of the new Passenger Rights Compensation Fund. It will pay for the legal fees of anyone wrongfully removed from a flight in this country for the next decade. A roar of applause broke out in the gallery. The former employees, the victims, the weary travelers, they all stood up. Senator Alvarez didn't bother to bang the gavel this time. She let it ring out. Vivian didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply gathered her papers, stood up, and nodded to the chairwoman. "I have no further comments, Senator. The numbers speak for themselves." As she exited the hearing room, the hallway was a gauntlet of chaos. Microphones were thrust into her face, questions shouted from every angle. "Dr. Toussaint, do you feel vindicated? Dr. Toussaint, did you know who Harrison Cole was when you refused to move? Vivian, are you running for Senate?" Vivian stopped near the exit. She looked at a young reporter who had asked the question about Harrison Cole. "I didn't care who he was," Vivian said softly, the cameras catching every syllable. "I only cared about what was right. The moment you let fear dictate your seat, you've already lost the flight." She pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the blinding DC sunlight. The air was thick and humid, smelling of exhaust and summer rain. A black town car idled at the curb. She climbed into the back seat, the coolness of the leather a welcome relief. She let out a long, slow breath, the first one that felt truly deep in half a year. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert at the Treasury. The wire transfer cleared. "The victim's fund is active." "You did it, Viv." Vivian typed a quick reply. "We did it." "Where to, Dr. Toussaint?" the driver asked, watching her in the rearview mirror with undisguised awe. "Reagan National," she said. "I have a vacation to take, somewhere with no cell service." "Very good, ma'am. Which airline?" Vivian looked out the window at the Capitol dome, gleaming white against the blue sky. She smiled, a small, private smile of absolute victory. "Train," she said. "I think I'll take the train." And that is how one woman, armed with nothing but a hoodie and a cell phone, took down a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's a brutal reminder that true power isn't about how loud you can scream or who your father is. It's about competence, integrity, and the courage to say no. Dr. Vivian Toussaint taught the world that you should never judge a book by its cover, and you should definitely never drag an auditor off a plane. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in seat 1A? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.